be live on Facebook as well. Another 2 minutes, I think we'll be live in Facebook as well. Rajiv is joining us.
Hi, Sudhir.
Hi, Rajiv. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, Preeti. Hi, Sabrina.
Hello, good evening. I cannot hear. Yeah.
So Rajiv happens to be the co-founder of Scuzo, who's organizing this entire series of Inspirasana.
Okay.
Good evening, Rajiv sir.
Good evening, ma'am.
Okay, guys, I think we're just about a minute away. Anushka, I'm just putting this live on Facebook, and then maybe we can start off. We can
Sure, sir.
go ahead with the introduction part.
Do we have someone else, Sudhir, who's going to join us?
Yes, we've got Dr. Amrita and Ms. Kajal Chatija, who's going to join us in another 5 minutes or 10 minutes, maybe. They're in some other panel, should be joining us shortly. Mr. Tijay Gupta is not well.
Okay. This is the first time I've seen so much of silence in the entire room, And, otherwise, where Sudhir is, there's always something or the other chat which is on.
We were actually chatting, but then Sudhir suddenly said we are going live, so we all just kept quiet.
Oh, okay.
But that's okay. We can always have a chat. That's fine. I think, Anushka, we can start off. It's already 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay. Good evening to one and all present over here. I would like to take this opportunity and welcome and thank our panelists. First of all, with us we have Dr. Sabina Keshwani, the Education Officer of Apijay Education Society. Dr. Sabina holds a rich experience of 26 years in education industry and is a principal for the last past 8 years. Dr. Sabina ma'am, we welcome you to our session. Next with us we have Ms. Preeti Pasricha. Ms. Preeti Pasricha is the Assistant Academic Coordinator of CP Goenka International School, Thane. Ms. Preeti holds a rich experience of 18 years in education sector. She is highly skilled and student focused. Next with us we have Ms. Kajal Chatija, the executive director of Gayatri School and Junior College. She is an enthusiastic and energetic leader in empowering and inspiring young minds and is loved by her students. Next with us we have Dr. Amrita Vora, the principal of GEMS International School, Gurgaon. Dr. Amrita holds a lot of experience in education sector and is widely appreciated by educators and parents. We have our moderator of the session, Mr. Sudhir Kukreja, the CEO and co-founder of Credence International School. I would like to take this opportunity and welcome our guest, Mr. Rajiv Kothari, the co-founder of Scuzo Educommerce. Mr. Kothari, I would like to request you to begin with the session.
Thank you so much, Anushka. Welcome, everyone, and pleasure to be here. Uh, so, to start with, Scuzo, I'll just give a brief about what Scuzo is all about. So, Scuzo e-commerce is a company which is a e-commerce company in the education space, right? Now, in today's world, if you talk about, with this pandemic which is there, has made us realize a lot of things. These schools where uh, a digital was something which was all, technology which was not something which was very common, is a need. The same thing which has happened in you know, the e-commerce part of it, where the traditional way of where the parents were going and buying books from the vendors shop or coming to the school, what we do is practically, parents just need to order the books online, need to place the order, and we deliver it at their doorstep. And it is not limited only to the books. We also do delivery of uniforms, shoes, or any other school essential which a child would need, and can place the order on our website. So that is what e-commerce is all about. We, as of today, have close to 150 plus schools whom we have tied up with. Our delivery standards are 3 working days, where we deliver the books in 3 working days to the parents. So we have seen some decent traction, need, and it is more of a service which is a need today, rather than just a value add sort of thing. So that's about Scuzo Educommerce.
Thank you so much, sir. Sudhi, so I would like to request you to continue with the session. And also, Dr. Amrita and Ms. Kajal is joining us very shortly. So they will be here soon.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Anushka. Thanks, Rajiv, for a quick introduction to Scuzo. I extend a warm welcome, first of all, to both my co-panelists and all the attendees who've joined us this evening. Thank you so much for being a part of this forum, and I look forward to some very interesting inputs on NEP. Well, to give you a quick background, everyone, my co-panelists as well, and the attendees who've been joining us last couple of weeks, we started off the series on NEP discussion about a month ago. Though we all have been a part of multiple sessions on NEP, multiple webinars that have been done, and I personally attended quite a few. But I guess we always found it very challenging to cover the entire scope of discussion around NEP in one single 40-45 minute session. And that is the reason we at, along with Scuzo, chose to divide this entire thing into 4 segments of pre-primary, primary, middle, and the secondary part. Over the last 3 weeks, we've discussed in quite extensive details the impact of NEP, various changes that have been brought in at the pre-primary level, primary level, and the middle school level. And today's session obviously is focused more on the changes that are proposed in the NEP policy from the secondary school perspective, and which I believe is one of the most important and quite critical a factor, as far as the policy change is concerned. That is something which is going to bring about a dramatic shift in the way the grown-up children, specifically the teenagers who are on the verge of entering a professional world outside and maybe go for their education beyond the school and colleges. Uh, so I guess I'm going to invite Ms. Preeti Pasricha on her for her opening remarks. Uh, in our discussion pre-session, I think she's mentioned a word is the 10+2 model likely to become absolutely irrelevant. And I thought that was quite an exciting statement to be made. How relevant would that 10+2 model be going forward? How will the change that is proposed in the policy going to impact the overall delivery of the schools and the way the education is treated across the schools in this country? I think, Preeti ma'am, I'd like to hear your views initially on this, and then of course we'll go deeper into the topic with multiple questions around.
Yes, sure, Mr. Sudhir. First of all, I would like to thank the platform of Scuzo and thanks to you, Sudhir, as well. So to answer your question, actually, it is not that the things are going to change with a stark difference. They're not going to change drastically at all. In fact, the policy aims at transforming the pedagogical structure from the existing 10+2 to more inclusive transition from foundational to secondary stage. People are actually worried about how is this going to happen, whether will it be overnight change, but it is not the case. In fact, it is going to be in phase manner. First, the new structure actually proposes dividing the earlier education into cognitive developmental stages, which is very, very important. The first 5 years are definitely going to be the foundational years that comprises of 3 years of preschooling and 2 years of primary education, wherein it will be thereafter it will be preparatory stage from 8 to 11 years, that is from class 3 to class 5, and it will focus more on experiential learning, and the focus will definitely, it was experiential learning already, but now the more focus will be on experiential learning, hands-on learning, project-based learning, and the focus would still remain on the development of language and numeracy skills. And the middle age is going to be from 11 strategy from the existing system to more experiential learning, as I just mentioned, in all subjects, which will focus to critical learning objective and not by learning by rote. Like most of the times children, we used to do this rote method learning, but it is definitely changed now. And instead of 10 plus 2, it is going to be 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. All of us know these numbers now. But to conclude with, the change is going to be transformational and not incremental.
That's interesting, ma'am. So I think you opened up the session to various dimensions. I'd like to invite Dr. Sabrina before I go and start, dwelling deeper into the various aspects of the policy change. I'm sure everybody on the panel and the audience have some glimpses, some idea about what are we talking about, how the policy is going to change. Dr. Sabrina, your opening remarks. How do you see this policy change impacting the education system all around us?
Namaste, everyone. Namaste to all the panelists and the audience. I'm thankful to SCUSO Education Conclave and to everyone in the team, for that matter, Mr. Kukreja and the entire team, for giving the opportunity. When we talk about national education policy, certainly it's very, very exciting, actually. Because after 34 years, you can see that that kind of change has come, and it was long awaited change. The new education policy brings the fresh breeze of, where you can freely select your subject choices, and the vocational courses, which is being incorporated in the secondary section. And the coding is also a part of now the secondary section. So that really gives a lot of insights to the students who want to pursue offbeat as their career. If I want to go and pursue pottery or farming or agriculture or carpentry. So a lot of scope has been given to the realm which was earlier, sidelined. That is the very important part of it. Secondly, the curriculum which is being taught in the present scenario is, lot of teachers are always rushing into, I want to complete my curriculum, whether it's an ICSE or IGCSE or IB or CBSE, anyone you take it for that matter, because keeping in mind the festivals, the cultural celebrations and the other things which crops up in the curriculum, that is the extracurricular, co-curricular, additional sports activities, all that which is a part of the holistic development now. So in that process, it's very difficult for a teacher, for an educator to complete the curriculum. But so now in the current policy, the more focus is being given to the core elements, the conceptual part of the understanding of the topic, which is very, very important, because once you understand the concept of the particular topic, whether it's a mathematics or it's science or it's a psychology, rather than just trying to understand that. So once your concept is clear, if you're investing that time in conceptual learning, you're half of the battle you have won. So that is again, very important element in the national education policy. The third is the kind of experiential learning, a lot of project work, a lot of practical based work, a lot of analysis kind of research work, which the children can do. And they will be supported by the educators. The fourth is the professional development of the educators. If the professional development of the educator is not forming the exact circular form, the implementation of the policy is at stake. So again, the professional development of the educators, which is lifelong learning, which is a continuous basis, though we say, but when it comes to practice, it gets really very difficult. So all these factors of the policy, which has come in 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, will really give a lot of insights and a lot of freedom of expression. Still, this is just a beginning. There are many changes yet to come, And I'm very happy with the policy, but still there are many changes which we can bring in and which will come phase wise. So certainly the implementation part, the execution part, the teachers development part, what we are talking, certainly it will not impact the infrastructure and the kind of, hybrid learning, kind of digital platform, all this with this technology and all this kind of assimilation, the secondary section teaching with the national education policy overall across the schools will become much, much holistic. Parents are very happy, students are very happy looking at it, discussing at it, reading at it. We all are waiting that when it will be implemented, it will take time. So that is the way my take on national education policy, and especially the secondary section, because I teach English, I take psychology, I teach mathematics. So certainly with this kind of freedom, you can, with only one book, you are not restricted to as an educator. You can refer to many books. The conceptual part of it, it's fantastic. It's a really fresh air to the current scenario. So very happy with the policy.
Well, those are interesting remarks, ma'am. So I'm quite intrigued with the excitement that you have around the changes which are proposed. And like I always say, devil is always in the details. So I'm going to get into the details of how do we go about executing this entire freedom-oriented model of teaching, number one. Number two, how do we go about molding the system that we've been so habitual of, right? Between the four of us sitting on the panel, I think we've spent decades in the education space, teaching students, nurturing teachers. I think we are the ones to be blamed for harping all the time for completing the curriculum and syllabus, etc. And I'd like to, really understand as to how much have we conditioned ourselves, in adapting the new normal, if I could probably use that word in a different context, not in the context of COVID for sure. But in the context of the policy, yes, it gives you a lot of freedom, but freedom, if not monitored and if not governed well, could at times be disastrous. So I'm going to come back to you for those detailed oriented questions. Before that, I think I'd like to welcome Dr. Amrita Vora into the discussion. Dr. Amrita, you've heard our thoughts. You've heard what am I really up to? Where am I really needing this? Before I go on to those tough questions, maybe your opening remarks, how do you see this policy change? How much of this freedom is a welcome change?
See, so policies, honestly, Sudhir, in India have always been wonderful. You look at the previous education policies and also a lot of the other, the NCF and other documents, we have so much in terms of policy. It's always really, really good. If you read through any of that, I wish it was implemented years and years ago. All the ideas and thoughts, so devil is in the details, you already said, and the detail also brings out that the budget for education hasn't changed really, hasn't changed much. And the portion of the GDP, the percentage of GDP itself is declined. So then what portion goes to education? So education really, I hope, comes to the center stage when it comes to the way the government looks at it in India. High time, we need to be, and education in India actually is a state subject, and then there is a center interference, and there is so much. I think it is the most regulated sector of all. All schools, we are all sitting here, but I know and you know that all the schools are struggling with all sorts of fee regulation and much more. And apart from that, in different states, there have been different challenges. So yes, there is a lot of challenges and struggles, but when you look at the policy per se, it's music to my ears as an educator. It raises all the pertinent questions. It kind of talks about all the important facts. It does talk about, for example, very, very clearly of bringing back that lost respect for the teacher, the guru in our culture. It does talk about doing away with just the Shiksha Mitra in the system, but actually having full-time teachers engaged there. How is the problem? Now, I don't know how much will be possible in the long run. We're all here, we'll all see. But we can all certainly, we can be critical. That is one way of looking at it. And we can actually be collaborative. That's the other way of looking at it. And we can all ensure that with our own little bit, each one of us can contribute. As you said, and I love you for saying that, we are the problem. We as the leaders are the ones who are always after that teacher's life, syllabus completion reports, etc., things that we ask for, right? So we are the problem. If it and change always happens from the top. If we, well, we cannot stop that. We have parents to manage, and we have children, and we have our answerability to every stakeholder, right? But how we do that, how we empower the teacher in that classroom, how we empower the parent, how we empower the child, how we empower maybe every vendor connected with our school, each stakeholder, and how we bring in that little influence that each one of us in our own individual capacity can, to make that change genuinely happen. See, we all want it. We all believe in all the right things that the policy is saying. We've been wanting and longing for it as progressive educators. But we need to then align ourselves. Now, if I talk about my schools or most of the other progressive schools in the country, I think most of the top schools are already aligned with a lot of the progressive ideas there. It is when we look at the larger picture, when we look at the very, very large multitude of education providers in this country, well, yes, there are gaps, and we all know. So I think a lot of the answer is in collaboration. If schools can collaborate, and the policy does talk about this too, if schools can collaborate in different ways, which let me say that is already happening, we've already initiated at GEMS, it does make a difference. Now there's a sea, but every drop matters. Let's think of it like that.
I love the statement, the closing words that you use. It is a sea and every drop matters. So I'm going to actually touch upon every drop that is probably going to make up this sea. And I've always believed that as an educationalist, it's very important and critical for us to be honest to the job at hand, honest to the situation that we have, honest to the task that we are supposed to be doing. And therefore, in the next 1 minute, I'm going to come to all three of you, Sabina and Amrita in the capacity of two school leaders, Preeti as a coordinator. One straight question: have we communicated it loud and clear across our schools that we are not worried about the syllabus anymore?
Yes, yes, we have.
Even at class 9, 10, 11, 12 levels?
Partly.
Okay, that's one.
I have an answer to that.
Yeah.
I cannot say that. But what I can do, as I said, is help them with the how. Ensure that the how is with them. They cannot, I mean, thankfully the boards themselves have reduced the syllabus. So that problem is at least this year behind us. But we know that whatever is there, we want the juice really to be taken out of it. We really want the child to learn everything genuinely, and we want children to go beyond the books and the boundaries. So therefore, all the critical thinking, creativity that needs to be developed has to be developed, and how the curriculum moves beyond. And this is an age of opportunity. This is the first time when education has transcended distance and time. Children can do way more than they were ever doing before. So I want to make use of those full opportunities, and teachers have come up with wonderful, wonderful creative solutions. And that syllabus is no longer a problem at all. That's the thing that I think we need to look at. That's important.
Super. I love the positivity, Amrita. Really a good positive attitude. Preeti, where do we stand?
Yes,
What's your
that's what
take
I
on
was saying. In fact, all thanks to NEP that the board exams will now more stress on holistic development, and its focus is going to be on social and emotional development. But yes, certain things, as we have to complete our syllabus and portion, those things will be there. But the best thing is that children are also going to learn skills now. So that was somewhere it was missing. So it has been introduced now. So thanks to NEP, I should say.
I think, to all three of you, I'd like to move the direction, the discussion from a standpoint of what the policy states to where do we stand and how do we implement. I think that's more critical. What does the policy state is something which is beaten to death in the last 3 months. Everybody's talked about it. I think what I would be more interested in, and I believe our audience would be more keen on understanding this aspect is how well prepared we are. I think with this, I'll move on to the other aspect of the thing. You guys have been really honest in, bringing up the perspective with which we have to be accountable for the syllabus. The transition obviously is going to be slow. It's not something which can happen overnight. And at the same time, it is going to bring in a lot of challenges. Now, I'm going to bring about another element, which is definitely a big positive. Amrita did talk about it. I think Sabina has also mentioned that in her opening remarks. The idea of allowing a lot of freedom for a child to choose the topics or the subjects that he's comfortable with, freedom to probably pursue education in an interdisciplinary manner. So there is no longer a boundary of mathematics or science or commerce or one of these streams. How do you think this entire thing is going to impact the learning process and the career paths? Because I believe 9, 10th, 11, 12th level is a real critical element, right? When it comes to, going, whether it is higher education, whether it is the entrance to the engineering colleges, medical examinations, chartered accountants, IAS officers, whatever that stream of education would be, how would this multiple combination thing impact? What are the positives that you see in this model, and what are the negatives or challenges that you feel could probably be there for anyone to address?
So if, shall I say something or is somebody else saying?
Anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Sudhir. So if I would like to state an example here, we all of us know about Steve Jobs. He, like the Apple, we are thankful to him. But then how many of us actually know that he was actually more interested in calligraphy rather than in attending his college? And because of he attending his calligraphy during his school days, he invented all the fonts in Apple phone. So similarly, I would like to say here, like sadly, it was before that marks had a lot of importance for getting admission in colleges and getting good jobs. But now, because of NEP, the focus has completely changed. As it is critical, the report card is going to change. It is more about critical thinking skills, creativity and problem solving skills, soft skills and communication skills. So it is definitely going to show us a stark change than what was it before. As you said, there's multiple entries and exits, but then academic liberalization is the need of the hour. And for that case, in fact, if I was given a choice in my school age, I would have definitely not chosen the subject which I was forced to. So if the children are given freedom at the early age of thinking of and deciding what do they want, that will definitely help them in long run, because they are actually asked to think of what do they want, not just asked to force, and not they are just not imposed by their school principals and teachers that you have to study this. If we give them choices in the beginning, they will definitely learn how to say no, which we have learned at a very later age. So this is the beauty of NEP 2020, that they are focusing on various skills rather than not only the marks as it was before, and we will definitely introduce in our schools itself.
So that brings me to another interesting question. And again, I'm putting it to the two principals sitting right here. I'm sure you've seen hundreds and hundreds, thousands of students choosing their streams every year. What percentage of those do you think make an informed choice?
So shall I?
And what is the method? What is the logic that goes into choosing that? Okay, I understand. Yes, today we've opened the gamut that you can choose out of 100 options, but still we always had those 5 options, right? Whether it was science, commerce, arts, humanities, whatever. How many of our students were actually making an informed choice out of those 4 options? Forget about 100 options.
Yeah, so see, this is a very, very critical choice. My own son is in grade 10 right now. And despite having been in education for years and years, as you said, and having seen so many children choose, even I am struggling as a parent.
That's remarkably honest.
Right? Yes, even I am struggling. The reason is that choice itself can be a struggle, by the way. Right? So he has a plethora of choice in an IB school. But as a parent, even I am struggling, because he's struggling. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what he wants next in life. He doesn't know what career choice would be good. He's watched Spider-Man, so he really is fixated on something on genetics. He's like, but then he's realizing, okay, that could be something too glamorous, and probably what I would actually like doing could be something else. Now that's pretty much just an example of how a child, a teenager, given, put in this situation where you have to choose, stands. They really are confused. And so, what as educators we really need to do, and as parents, we really need to do, is to help them or provide them the critical support at this stage of information fluency and solution fluency. Now, what do I call these? We are all surrounded with tons of information, but it's utterly confusing information all across. Now, thinking through that information requires a lot of logic, requires a lot of critical thinking, and a lot of analysis. Now, that the child cannot do alone. We have to allow for creativity, we have to allow for that divergent thinking, and then ultimately bring them to ideate and finally come to some sort of decision. The decision, of course, has to be theirs, but then to arrive at the right decision, supporting factors, providing that support, the facilitation of it has to be done well, and that's key. That's why, I mean, at these days, I don't know if any university is left who's not done a session in the school. We've been inviting various universities to talk it through with children. There is the liberal arts program. There are so many other different kinds of programs incorporated into the universities. Now everything trickles from the top. Now, if a child today also, despite the NEP, wants to do a NEET exam, it still says you need physics, chemistry, biology. Now, if a child is going to study physics, chemistry, biology, then he cannot really think of choosing too many other tough subjects, probably, right? So it trickles down from the top. If that will change, or if a child will start thinking in the direction of, this is not the profession I'm looking at, it's very tough at this stage to decide, because by the time they're in grade 10, they haven't really seen what's coming next, probably, or how tough the level of those subjects changes dramatically in grade 11, even today, right? So how that is going to work out for them or not, they don't know yet. I'm often seen children who are very dogmatic, and they would say, no, I want to do this and only this, and end of story, I'm not taking anything else. So maybe a lot of coaching culture and so on has created a lot of this also. Even today, we are all faced with endless parents who are not thinking beyond the IITs and the CPMTs. Even today, that culture persists to a great extent. That will change only when it changes at the top, at the college level. And it is changing, thankfully, but it's going to take some time. From there, this will trickle down for sure. But yes, I do see children taking very different streams, opting for very, very different streams, and very, very large percentage of students. And that's why since a couple of years at the school, we've been offering very different choices. For example, a science student can take a pol science, of course, an economics. And this is, I'm talking before the NEP also. We've been offering those, and children have been opting for those. And they do realize in grade 11 or 12 or thereabouts that, oh, I thought I'll do this, but I prefer this, so I'm going ahead with this. And they've already proceeded with very, very different out of the league kind of careers, and they're doing well because it's ultimately what they love doing. So that's a process of helping a child really explore and find that this is my calling. It's been a process for you and me. Maybe we got to it much later in life. I mean, I feel had I got that guidance, I would have done this instead of this back in my days of college. But this, if we can do for our children now when they really need it most, it's really urgent and important, and we should be able to do it. We know so many career counseling institutes thrive on this factor. But at the end of it all, it still comes down to the people in school, the counselor within the school, who can, and the teachers who can really tell the child, help the child rather, and let them decide.
2 points on this interesting and elaborate description here. One, I finished my MBA after 6 years of work experience in finance. Worked for one of the top-notch equity research companies in the country for 2 years after MBA, and then realized this is not for me. And I said, all right, bye-bye. Thank you so much, finance career. My MBA is of no use, and I need to go back to education. So with that thought, I want to come back to you, Sabina. Amrita has very, very, very interestingly highlighted that eventually it comes down to the counselor and the teacher to mentor the child, guide him, help him choose what it is. But I think I have a very relevant question here. How prepared are we to do that? Do you think, and I'm not talking about APJ, I'm not talking about GEM, and I'm not talking about CP Goenka specifically. I'm talking about the ecosystem that we all are collectively a part of. Where do you think we stand? Do you think, even in the best of the institutes in this country today, are we at our school levels prepared to, guide a child to choose and decide where does your calling lie, what you should do, where somebody like Amrita with her experience admits that, okay, she's finding it difficult, where does the teacher stand? And like I mentioned, keep my background in mind, MBA, finance, economics, and then Geronome. Over to you.
What I feel like, a child is in maybe in IGCSE or IB, whatever curriculum. So like in ninth grade, we generally give the selection of streams. So that point of time, even parents are not very clear, even the child is not clear. But still, we give the option that you opt for both commerce and science, take for 1 month, and still, you can select. But still, after 10th grade, they find it very difficult. So certainly in the new education policy, what we say, the role of professional development of teachers will be extremely and exclusively very important. So the teachers needs to be, like kind of trained for that. This is the way you need to help out student in terms of selecting their subjects, mentoring the child, and as a teacher, as a spirally linked up teacher, a teacher knows when you pass on the file from grade 4 to grade 5 or grade 5 to grade 6 of a child, that where the child's interests lie. So the parental role, the teacher's role, the counselor's role, and even as a personal growth, what is my interest, what is my hobby? So like we do a personality awareness career exploration program in general. As a psychologist, I do that. So in that, you give them all that outbound activities to do, and you try to converse with the child, what the child likes, what is the child dislike. So it is well said in the research also that the child will change his career couple of times in the upcoming years. Maybe we are stick to one particular career, and you said it now that now you feel that you're too kind of bogged down with this. Saturated with your finance career, right? You feel that that's not for me. So similarly, the new generation, the IFA generation child will not stick to one particular career. So the interest in the hobbies will go on changing as per, they may get saturated after 4 years, after 5 years, after 7 years. So certainly all the stakeholders will help out a child. But finally, it's your own battle and you have to fight it out, So the child needs to take a call. So we need to nurture a child. We need to prepare a child, like for a garden, for example. If you want to nurture a garden, you need to see that the soil is fertilized, the water, sunlight is available. Every ingredient is given to a child. At the same time, the mentoring, the helping hand, the support system is very powerful. And it's not just for the sake of, but continuously it is being monitored. Then we can also guide students, and the students, as per their understanding, can certainly take a call on that. So it is a risky, and very difficult to say that, which career, but at least the child get that kind of a support. But current system, if we see, though we talk and we converse, hardly any qualified parents, they give that kind of time and nurturing and they look into it. Otherwise, people are so occupied and so busy that I have seen parents, they send students to tutoring and they say, बिठा के रखना, 1 घंटे का time है, बिठा के रखो उसको ज्यादा आएगा. अरे 1 hour, 2 hour, how long the child can sit and child can actually do all that kind of academics? The child's limit is over. But still parents, you wonder qualified parents talking like that. So all that needs to be, like kind of the revolution needs to come from the school side, from the parent side, and the sessions needs to be taken so that they get the understanding how to actually help out a child to select a career. It is really very difficult. That a child alone may find it difficult at this kind of initial, even to select a subject, to select a stream. But with the new education policy, in 11th grade, you can complete, you can take a break, your academic credits, ABC is, accumulated. Again, you can once again go to maybe internship or maybe you can work out, and then you can try to identify what career you would like to take. So that are all the options, you can select, and you can then take a call on that.
I'm just butting in here. I think Sabina has raised a very, very key point here. One is parents are very key in this entire process. Parents have to have a buy-in, and they play a huge, huge role. And the other thing she's very correctly said is that careers will not be like one career you've chosen. We are from a generation which has been changing jobs, and our children's generation is going to be changing careers, not just once or twice like you and me, but maybe every 5 years. That's what research tells us, that every 4 or 5 years they will be not just changing job, they will be, because that career may be over before you know it. Imagine our children today in school might be retiring around 2080. Imagine what we can't really predict the future. So I think what's very, very key, and how we can equip them today, is equipping them with unlearning, relearning, that whole idea of learning how to learn. That metacognition is the most key ability that we can instill. um, she gave the example of Steve Jobs, from calligraphy to Apple. So see, where life will take you, for nobody, we don't know, right? So that's where we are.
So I guess there are two words which I pick up from this discourse. One is clarity. While we all struggle with the clarity of what's going to be there in future and what needs to be chosen, I think the maximum amount of clarity that a child gets is probably from his friend circle or the peer group, instead of the parents or anybody else, on a lighter note. But I think the other word which I chose is more critical. And with this, I think I'll go back to Preeti and then bring in Kajal. Kajal, welcome to the forum. Thank you so much for joining us. My question to both of you would be: I think the key word, which is a which was kind of an undercurrent in what Sabina and Amrita mentioned here, was the word is exposure. The more the exposure that can be given to a child, whether it is in the form of internships, whether it is in the form of exploring with the industry people, whether it is in the form of counseling by counselors, what's needed is that exposure. Now, and NEP does talk about creating that infrastructure, creating that ecosystem of bringing in much more practical, real life experiential exposure inside the classroom. Yeah. So, Preeti and Kajal, how do you see this exposure becoming an integral part of the, teaching learning process as we embrace the new policy and the next decade?
Okay, Mr. Sudhir, if I go back to you, whatever you said, that you had taken admission in MBA in finance, but then after a few years you decided of going back to education. So it was, you decided only when you got the exposure of MBA, right? Even that was 50,000 years ago. People got exposed to danger. There was only danger all around next to them, and they were only exposed to danger, and they used to feel safe only when they were among their tribe. So if I start from a 1 day old baby, what does he know? He only knows how to make sounds, that is crying and laughing, that is it. He only learns how to talk, how to, in which language to speak, once he gets exposure to that particular language. So similarly, if you're getting exposure of all the things in your school life about internships, about vocational skills, so it will definitely help you in making choices when you grow up in your career life. So all these things of changing your careers is only because you have that trial and error has not been done in school days. So that is why they do in their career life. So this should happen in school days so that they should know what I am good at. Now, if suddenly out of the blue, I ask any of the panelists here or even myself, I ask you to speak in Arabic language, will we be able to? We will not. Because we have not heard Arabic, any of the people around us conversing in Arabic language. Even if we have a wish of flying a plane, that wish also comes from if we have seen airplanes flying in the sky. So unless we don't get exposure through our eyes, through all the five senses, how is it that we will come to know whether are we suitable for this particular thing or not? So thanks to this NEP, I will say that children will get exposure for vocational skills from grade 6 onwards, and it will definitely help them to choose which kind of career they should go into. They will definitely know where they actually have their liking to, because the skills will be tested now. I hope I have answered your question, Mr. Sudhir.
True. I'll be interesting to hear Kajal on this.
Yes, and more or less, of course, I have missed quite a lot. So, good evening, one and all, and I can see brilliant, vibrant faces over there. And thank you, sir, for inviting me. And coming back to your question of providing this exposure, one thing for sure is like we as leaders of the school, that rigid factor which was always there, as we move towards the higher secondary, we used to have a rigid subjects. So this is the time to celebrate,
True.
where we have, for children, I hope if such things were available for us, we would have been, at some other places, right? So the choice is available with them. And another thing to celebrate is, as Miss Preeti was talking about vocational courses, starting from such young age, from being into grade 6, they will be able to acknowledge and realize their hidden potential through this exposure which they will be getting in the school itself. When we talk about, compulsory internship, involving internship in the school, where they get real life experience of going to, maybe if talk about this technology, I can experience going into industry, and we can have such industrial visit as well. So by then, when I am in 11th and 12th, I will have a better clarity of what exactly I as a student I have to do it. So this NEP 2020 has given us a roadmap. Now of course we all have equal role to play, how we are going to incorporate it. Of course we have this document in our hands, and we might have discussed on it in n number of platforms like this. But high time, and thank you so much for selecting this pertinent topic, and where we are also thinking of bringing our students back to school. Why not make this approach as a, you can say, now we still have 4 months to go. Why not are we as educators, leaders, tell our students to bridge, or you can say make the roadmap of how to run a school. Why not tell them, instead of we breaking our heads, and then by December, Jan, of course our 9th, 10th and 11th, 12th junior college students will be back. We might have hybrid learning system, what we are having in abroad, it is already functional. So let us try all these with our students to start with.
So I think the most interesting word that I picked up from your discourse was a word called roadmap, which I've heard in a lot of webinars. I've heard every educator talk about a roadmap. And very honestly, what I'm interested in is the roads. We've heard of a lot of roadmaps, but I'm really looking for the road that will lead to the eventual success that we're talking about. And when I talk about these roads, I think roads have milestones. And if I bring these milestones in the context of education, we're talking about assessments.
Yes.
We're talking about, our competitive exams. So whether it is assessments at the 10th or 12th level, or it is assessment for the entrance examinations, or it is assessment at the college level, or eventually the assessment for the jobs that we are talking about left, right, and center. I'd like to bring in Amrita into this discussion back. How do you see this assessment, being reshaped or led into a different direction? I understand that, yes, for this policy to be effective, for all the changes that we're talking about, whether it is vocational part, whether it is internship, whether it is experiential learning, unless we have a new definition, a new methodology, a new milestone of assessment defined, and if we still have that 10th and 12th board with that subjective thing, I am personally of the opinion nothing is going to change, how much ever we talk, right? Because we know the psychology of the parents, we know the psychology of the school management, we know our necessity to produce results to get admissions next year. As simple as that. How do you see this assessment thing looking at a change, and where does it lead?
So the good news for us is, while your question is very pertinent and true, and I'm sure everybody's thinking about it, there are two things which are really a good news. One is the policy is already talking about a 360-degree approach, and the other is that CBSE, which is the most prominent curriculum in our country, and ICSE usually tends to do similar things on a lot of radical fronts, is already talking about a different style of assessment. There's already a process of change already begun. The shift is already begun. Yes, it will be gradual, but it has begun. So that's the good news for us. On the other hand, while, you know, CBSE for that matter, long ago tried to bring CCE, which was a very radical and the shift in the right direction, it is the schools who failed it. Okay, and it was backtracked. It is later again, now they're trying to bring it again, but with a different approach. So we're already, CBSE is already talking competency based learning. CBSE is already talking that, you know, the paper, the examination paper of the board exams, this much percentage and that much percentage, and it's growing over the years, is more on critical thinking or concept based, or rather, you know, case study based and so on and so forth kind of questions. So that it again, it moves from there. So that's already changing. And as a school that has always had a 360-degree approach to assessment, I mean, we cannot see children, and I've firmly believed in this forever, right from the time when I first moved into K-12 education, quite like you, from a different zone. But I firmly believe that we cannot look at children as a collection of percentages. It has to move away from that approach. It is very tough to convince parents. It is very tough to convince even teachers within the system sometimes, but it's important. It has to be done. It's a no-go. You have to do it. You can't give up on it, right? So therefore we have to, and professional development does play a role, of course, but professional development is not just required for our teachers, it is equally required for parents, because they're equal stakeholders in the whole process, right? And when we're able to do that, so one example I'll take is the way we do assessments is children are a very key, self-assessment is a very, very key or central element of assessment in our schools. So children regularly engage in self-assessment. They have 3 colored pens. Even during this pandemic, while remote learning is on, they still self-assess their work. Rubrics are a very key element built in. They have clear expectations. They know how to do it. They do identify themselves their yellow boxes. Peer assessment is also a key element. And then twice in a year, apart from the 2 terms and the term end reports, etc., twice in a year apart from that, children get achievement cards and they have student-led conferences. I'm talking of also early childhood and till the top, till grade 12. They may be appearing for a board exam, but they won't be able to do well even there unless they have done their own SWOT, unless they are able to communicate what they've learned very well. So it's not the teacher who has a PTM with the parent. It is the child who does with the teacher and the parent. So the child leads the way, and the child talks about, this is what I did, this is what I enjoyed doing during this 4 months or 3 months or 2 months of learning. This is what I found tough. I couldn't do it. And this is why I finally managed to. This is how I got over my problem. That reflective analysis, that reflection on that portion is very, very key. Whatever you may have covered, it is not only to do with English, math, science, the core subjects. It is also to do with what I managed in dance, what I managed in the integrated project, what I managed in sports, what I did not manage, and what I was able to do while I tried debating and so on. So they critically evaluate, and then they also understand or evaluate what is it that helped out. When I was not able to do it, what helped me, what worked for me, what strategy did I apply and that worked fine, and here I am. The child details out all this and then sets very clear, or we help them set smart goals for themselves. These could be short term and long term, but they set very clear goals. It could be as simple as, I know I have made too many spelling mistakes this time around, and I'm going to work on this. Till now I was trying this strategy, this isn't very useful, now I'm going to try this strategy. Learning like never before is self-directed today. We've been talking about student-centered learning since ages, but I think never before have we been able to do it the way we have all had to do it during the pandemic. They are not with us anymore. To abhi baith jao aur ab padna hi padega. वो तो हो नहीं रहा है. So here we are, and children are self-directed, but then it can happen only when it is self-directed. The same teacher may teach the same thing to 30 students, but everybody takes back something else. Same parent does the same things for 2-3 children. Everybody learns differently, does something else, and so on, turns out differently, and so on. So each child is different. And I think this self-direction in the whole process of assessment, where it's not about you pass or fail or you get this much or that much, it's actually about an education paradigm where there's nobody's failing. It's all about growth mindset. It's all about, okay, I'm going to continue trying this till I'm as good as good can be, right? So everybody can. I mean, this is how, and this is the innate human process of learning. This is how a child learns to walk. This is how a child learns to talk. There is endless falling down, but but that's again the way we learn. So that is what is required in the process of teaching and learning. Now, if you look at it from a Montessori perspective, the didactic material becomes the way you provide that support to the child without saying no, but you do provide correction of error. And if you look at it from our constructive, genuinely constructive feedback from the teaching and learning fraternity is the way we provide that support to the child. So I think this is how assessment needs to be really looked at.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to pick up one comment which is made by one of our audience members. He says, there has to be an element of competency-based learning system. And I'm going to throw this question open to all four of you. Anybody can choose to answer. And it's probably, I don't know, fortunate or unfortunate. I've got four panelists who probably represent some of the top-end schools in the country today. But I'd like you all to go beyond the schools that you are running and think of it in a little more holistic way, include the rural schools into it, include the state board schools into it. I don't know how many of you have the exposure to each one of those elements, but wherever you feel you will have the relevant experience or exposure, that competency, and then the competency at the level of the child, competency at the level of the teacher, competency at the level of the management, and when I say competency, I'm not just talking about intellectual or academic competency. I'm talking about the ability of that ecosystem, whether it is financial, whether it is management-wise, whether it is exposure-wise, whether it is academically. How do we do justice to this entire policy change and the equity of the entire implementation? How do we do that I don't know what's the right word, maybe I'm missing that, but how do we make sure that we are being fair and just to all the stakeholders in the system?
So can I?
Yeah.
So I generally believe that resources lies in the mind, So like if you take the rural area also, and if you don't have that kind of comfortable environment or all the infrastructure, what actually you require and what we have in the urban area. But if the qualitative parameter is strong, right from the top till the end, and if all the stakeholders are covered, then I think keeping that factor in mind, we continuously we monitor, we guide them, and we bring out those qualitative parameters, whether the school is in rural area or in urban area, and we try to make students competent enough to understand the curriculum, to understand the concept well, and also the
I'm sorry, Sabina, I'm cutting you short, but I'm going to pick up that word which you used, if the qualitative parameters are in right place.
Yes.
So it's not just about the resources. I've traveled to places which are in the extreme remote parts of the country. The problem is that those qualitative parameters are not there. I mean, it's not just about the infrastructure in the rural areas. It's also about the mindset of the parents. It's also about the exposure to those parents themselves. It's also about the attitude of the teachers. I went in to take a training program in a house full of 250 government schools, which was something which I did out of, call it a CSR or whatever. And the moment I entered inside the classroom, I was told, sir, you are being paid for your class. We are being paid for attending the training program. Please relax for an hour and leave.
Yeah,
On my face.
So that's the mindset you need to change. The leadership needs to actually very vibrant and very passionate about it. We talk now why you are here in the teaching profession. It said we are passionate about it. So that passion needs to come from the person who is leading. The person doesn't have that passion, that kind of inspiring approach, that kind of change within, that burning desire, you know, the fire in the belly. If it is not
See,
there,
the challenge here is that we're not talking about an institution which has someone leading. We're talking about an entire ecosystem which may not really have anyone specifically leading it. You know, an ecosystem doesn't have any individual leading it. It's the system. Now the
sometimes,
problem is who's going to bring about that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
sometimes teachers say we don't get, you know, like training from the school. It is being paid, so this, that, you know, you have to sign a bond. We don't want that. So then some of the teachers, they take the training on their own because they have that burning desire. They want to grow. They want to actually, you know, like expand themselves. So that burning desire needs to come from within. How long you're going to depend on others? How long you're going to depend on leaders also? That change needs to, you know, you need to initiate. Mahatma Gandhi initiated that change. There was no one to support. Huh? That change needs to come from within.
I agree.
That
So
change will not come. And if you will always wait for the resources, or always wait for the, I will get this, then I will do, I will get that, then I will proceed. That is not going to happen, sir. That is not going to happen. You have to
well, I
initiate one.
partially agree.
So, it's just,
I think-
so that's a giant step which you have to take. Change is a giant step. Right?
So, Mr. Sudhir, yeah.
Sudhir, I feel like I'm sitting in a Pranav Goswami's, you know, chat.
I'm not. I'm not. I seem to have opened a Pandora's box, but I'm sure without needing to a lot of controversial discussion, I'll come back to Kajal. I believe she has something to
Yeah,
add.
I would like to add, it's a very, very, like, you've hit the dart. This is the time of transformation. I would like to quote over here: stop teaching, start transforming. Okay. Where we are talking about the ecosystem, I'll give you my own example. My son is in 10th, and not even single day I've been telling him, bacha, please focus, you have to appear for board exams. I've been telling him almost every day, and you know what answer I am getting? I hope we'll all get from his answer, and you'll be shocked what answer I get. Mama, take a chill pill. Pandemic hai, okay? There'll be no board exams. Everybody, and we are not here to pressurize children. And please do not discuss with me this technology. This box is enough for me, and I'm facing this for 3 to 4 hours in a day, and I don't want to listen about it anymore. And this year, board, you know, all the board members and all the teachers they are also in a relaxed mood. You also be relaxed. This is what these answers I'm getting from my students, from my own child. So here, what question, I hope I am touching the, you can say, the iceberg, where we have to develop the competency level, and even it should come from the leaders, the teachers, and of course that's how it is going to transform into our own students. So it's a brilliant question which we all have to ponder upon, and we all have to, discuss more about it, how to develop. And it's being already it's been 8 months now. Of course, these students have to appear for board exams, and this competency level has to develop, from where it will come. Even I am, as a leader, I always, take sessions, address parents, address students, and try to motivate. But somehow there is a feeling of being a little reluctant, considering, and they have taken this pandemic as, you can say, opportunity.
A lot of us have actually done that. I'll go back to Preeti and Amrita for their closing remarks as we come to the end of the session. Truly enjoyed. This was amazing, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure I'm going to come back to each one of you personally for a lot deeper discussion. I guess this 1 hour was not enough, and will definitely need much longer deliberations on the topic. Preeti and Amrita.
Yes, sure, Sudhir. I would like to close with a statement by answering to, there was a message sometime ago by Aradhna in the chat box. She was saying actually the parents need a capsule of change, I guess. something she had messaged. I would say, like, people actually, since we are educators, we know that change is important. But parents who are not educators, they hardly know this, that change is important. If we take our own example, a few years ago, we all were so much rigid on that we will not change from Nokia to Samsung. Actually, that is the thing. People are so used to see the sun rising every day कि एक भी दिन सूरज भी नहीं आता तो बोलते हैं कि सूर्य ग्रहण लग गया. They are rigid in actually they get rigid because they see certain things every day because they have come up, they have grown up in a certain manner. So to unlearn is the key. Unlearn to learn new things is the key, and embrace the change with open arms. You will definitely help your child to grow better into a good human being and into a good citizen.
So I'm going to invite you for another session, Preeti, on how to unlearn this. I guess that is going to become my next.
Yes, definitely. I would.
Over to you, Amrita.
Definitely.
Thanks, Preeti, and thanks, Sudhir. I think you've made this a really engaging, interesting session for everyone. Therefore, the 1 hour has fallen too short. It's not a session where people are taking turns and going quiet and everybody's very serious. I think people are pouring out. Everybody on the panel is actually talking from the heart, and they're being dead honest. So that's the beauty of it. So I'll just add a couple of thoughts on the very pertinent question that you raised, that you were in this situation where you had this set of teachers and they told you that you're being paid for it, we're being paid for it, just have some fun for an hour. I've been in similar situations quite a few times because I've worked with some budget private schools and also some government setups of schools where I was trying to work on quality. And yes, it is very, 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 very tough. It was like I'm trying to hit the wall and nothing can work here. Why am I consistently trying? But then I'm still going to say, after having experienced all that there is hope. The kind of things that ultimately I was able to do with those teachers there. Of course, there is a dearth of resources. Of course, there is not as much as is possible maybe in a more urban setting where you have everything. Internet, I just now call roti kapda makan, or internet abhi wo roti kapda makan jitna important hai. So that's become an essential that should be there. Hopefully that will happen soon. Right now, the digital divide itself is killing when we look at the reality and in the larger spectrum. But just one little example, we all talk about phonics, and it's tough even in some of the most progressive schools to have every teacher and every parent really understand the value and how to take it forward. Very funny kind of sessions I've seen happening, and sometimes what people call phonics is not really phonics, and it's not an easy thing to ensure or embed in the system even in a very progressive school. But yes, of course, I'm sure people have done it. Within the village system, where they have zero resources, we use something called Phonics by Phone, and anyone can access it. It is a free tool, and phonicsbyphone.org, anyone can access. The teachers actually learned it using that. Those are just 15-minute audios that they watch, and they help teachers to build it in. And those teachers who don't even understand English, and these are sessions in English, and they're teaching English. Yeah, they don't understand, but they're teaching English, and let's know and be sure that is pretty much the reality in many of our schools across India. So they did understand, and they were implementing. When I observed some of those lessons after trying for 2-3 months and having given up inside me, kuch nahi hone wala, main jaungi phir wahi hoga class mein. But I actually saw all of that happening in those classrooms, in those villages. So there is hope. Education is, as I think somebody already said, it's about passionate engagement with learning, and it's about inspiring. It's about, so if I were you in that session and all I did was had some fun, and in that fun put in some nuggets which ultimately worked, and by the end of it they wanted another session for which neither they nor I were being paid for, right? So these are the things that we have to, these are the ways in which I think we need to look at it. And if we do all of us in this panel, at least, and many more educators all around, like all of us, can make a huge, huge difference. Like I'll again say the same thing, every drop matters.
Well, on that note, Amrita, thank you so much. Indeed, I had a lot of fun in that session too. I'm sorry, Kajal, I missed.
I said let's link the dots over there.
I'm
Yeah.
sure, for sure, for sure. So in fact, connecting the dots right here, what I actually gathered out of this session the most, from Amrita, I picked up a really amazing positive attitude to look at everything from a positive lens. From Preeti, I've got that passion, that progressive mindset, that constant, I would say, inclination to look at the future in a progressive way. Do I have my questions and arguments, stuff that I'll keep bothering her for in terms of the implementation? From Sabina, I've taken a fighting spirit, and I believe she's got that attitude of taking things head on. And Kajal, of course, has had some amazing anecdotes to share with, which were more relevant to everybody's life, and I'm sure everybody would have related it to. Thank you so much, everyone. I look forward to joining you all again, having a personal chat one-on-one. And I hope all the audiences had a great time. Do join us for our future sessions. Thanks to all the panelists and the attendees in this session. Thanks a lot for your time. You have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Mr.
everyone. And do stay in touch, please.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.